Well, hello. My name is Brent Smith, and I'm the Common Constitutionalist, and this is my podcast, the Weekend Common Constitutionalist video podcast. And I'm out on location. Hopefully it won't rain on me. That would be a good thing. Today, for Memorial Day weekend, I'm going to skip the politics. I'm going to skip all the other bull crap that I usually talk about. And today I'm just going to cite 4 or 5 examples of posthumous Medal of Honor winners from history, from World War I all the way up through recent years. And that's what we're going to do. I'm not going to discuss it. I'm just going to read them off, and that'll be it. And this is going to be to honor the fallen soldiers, sailors, Marines, everybody, all the fallen military personnel that have given so much for this country, for us to be able to do what we do, for me to be able to do what I do. So that's what it's going to be all about today on the Common Constitutionalist. You're watching the Common Constitutionalist Weekend Video Podcast. Alright, welcome back. Again, I'm Brent Smith. I'm the Common Constitutionalist. And today I'm going to be talking about 4 or 5 Medal of Honor recipients over the last century and a half or so. And, well, maybe not that much, but getting there. Any rate, let's just start in on it. Medal of Honor winner. I'm going to start at World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, all the way up through today. Kinda-ish. So the first one for World War I was through started in June through October of 1918. And his name was Edward Isaac. He was born in Iowa in 1891, and he grew up speaking German in his house. Isaac concealed his facility with the German language, from his German captors when they held him aboard their U-boat in 1918. Had they known that Isaac understood what they were saying, and they had no idea. They just thought this guy spoke English, and so they took him captor aboard the U-boat. Well, I'll get into that in a minute. They were speaking freely, figuring that he wouldn't understand German. All the while, he was listening in on every conversation, and he got some pretty interesting material. So Isaac graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy in 1915, bugs, egads, and initially served on the battleship USS Florida. When America entered World War I, he transferred to the Naval Transport Service, and in 1917, the junior grade lieutenant was assigned to the troopship USS President Lincoln. By spring of 1918, Isaac had been made 5 transatlantic crossings from New York on the USS President Lincoln. By the 5th voyage, Isaac had become the ship's executive officer, and in late May 1918, the President Lincoln, USS President Lincoln, disembarked on its latest load of troops at Brest, France, and on the 29th started for New York in a convoy escorted by destroyers. On May 31st, only 2 days after they disembarked, the German submarine U-90 put 3 torpedoes in the President Lincoln, and although the transport sank in a little more than a half an hour, most of the 715 men aboard managed to get into lifeboats. The U-90 meanwhile surfaced, and its commander demanded the transport's captain accompany the sub to Germany as proof of the sinking. Isaac, speaking English only, because he didn't want to tip his hand, told the Germans that the captain had been killed in the attack, which he hadn't. So the U-boat crew took the executive officer prisoner, who was Edward Isaac. While aboard U-90, Isaac listened to and watched everything around him. Gaining critical intelligence that could be used against the U-boats, Isaac knew that he must get the information to the Allied authorities. Soon after arriving in Germany, Isaac was placed in a POW camp from which he made several escape attempts. A month later, Guards put him on a train to another camp. En route, dig this, he's on a speeding train, and he leapt from the train under fire. They recaptured him and beat the living crap out of this guy. So Isaac attempted escape again after reaching the new camp. And now this guy is just time after time after time putting himself out there, trying to escape and trying to help his compatriots. After scaling barbed wire one night, he purposely drew fire from guards, enabling the POWs to flee. Isaac and a fellow prisoner then made their way through Isaac's ancestral homeland, hiding in the woods and eating and living on raw vegetables. Reaching the Rhine, he evaded the German sentries and swam across. They swam across from Germany to Switzerland. Isaac finally reported, now this is the tragedy of this thing, he finally reported to the Bureau of Navigation in Washington, D.C. on November 11, 1918, the day the war ended. So he had all this valuable information, and he got to be able to give it up on the day that the war ended. So the fact that Isaac's information was no longer useful it detracted in no way from his heroism during more than 5 months as a POW. He received the Medal of Honor, but the injuries sustained during his escape attempts ended his Navy career. He was medically retired in 1921. He became a U.S. House of Representatives, a Democrat in the House from 1937 to 1945. Or 1947, and in 1945 he actually joined a delegation that inspected the liberated Buchenwald, Mittelbau, Dora, and Dachau concentration camps in April of 1945. Isaac died in January of 1990 at age 98, and he is the first U.S. Navy's first recipient of the Medal of Honor for heroism as a POW. He was buried with full honors at Arlington National Cemetery. This dude, I mean, it's a shame that he wasn't able to give his information up for the cause of the war, but that, like they said in this documentary, it certainly didn't detract from his heroism. This guy did everything he could possibly do to get the information to these people, and he was severely beaten on a number of occasions. It didn't matter. He never gave up any information to the enemy. He just took it all in, remained vigilant, and just attempted to escape after escape after escape. It's just absolutely unbelievable. So we're going to take a quick break. Be right back for beginning the next example will be from World War II. Be right back. Alright, I'm back. The next Medal of Honor recipient, William Lawley. The skies over Europe during World War II were a hostile and deadly place. More than 52,000 airmen died or were declared dead as a direct result of combat missions. 52,000 died. Vietnam, I think we had a total of 58,000 dead in the entire Vietnam War, and this 52,000 airmen died. Just airmen in combat missions. Bombers were poorly armored, they were slow moving. If you've ever seen the B-17s, the B-25s, you know that to be a fact. And the men that had to endure unpressurized cabins with constant sub-zero temperatures. Safety countermeasures didn't exist. Engine fires were common, and were almost and basically you got into these things pretty much knowing that you weren't going to come back. It was like a suicide mission almost every time. That didn't happen, obviously, but that's the way the mindset was for these air crews. During a bombing run in February 1944, William Lawley was the pilot of a B-17 that came under attack by 20 enemy fighters. Lawley's aircraft was quickly shot out of formation and left unprotected. 8 crew members were immediately wounded, the co-pilot was killed, and the majority of the controls were destroyed. On top of that, Lawley himself sustained a serious head wound and learned one of the And on top of that, one of the engines was on fire. So there was blood spattered all over the windshield, which reduced his visibility nearly to zero. Steering the plane with only his left arm, Lawley put the B-17 into a steep dive to extinguish the engine fire. During the dive, he was informed that 2 of the crew were too severely wounded to bail out. With that in mind, Lawley turned the plane back toward England, while giving the crew the option to bail out. With the engine fire spreading, Lawley refused first aid until he passed out. Dig this. He's flying the plane with one arm and a head wound, and he refused first aid, and he passed out from blood loss from his wounds during this flight. He was revived by the bombardier and remained at the controls until successfully crash landing the B-17 at a base in England after another engine fire and running out of fuel. Lawley accomplished all of this with the extra weight of the... See, they never even got to do their bombing run. So he accomplished this with all the extra weight of the bombs still on board. Why? Because the bomb racks were frozen in place from the high altitude and the unpressurized cabins. That's why. It's unbelievable. Next one up, still in World War II. It's hard to fathom how primitive military technology was during World War II. Without satellite imagery, unmanned drones, radar, soldiers, military personnel today, I think, take electronics and this high-tech stuff for granted. You take a look back or talk to some of these World War II vets, and this is what you find out. How primitive the military technology. No satellite imagery, unmanned drones, no radar, no nighttime reconnaissance or night vision capabilities of any kind. World War II infantrymen only had moonlight in their ears to detect an enemy at night. It was relatively easy for both sides to advance into attack-ready positions under cover of darkness. That's exactly what happened. That's exactly what Japanese forces did to Charles Berry's unit on Iwo Jima in March of 1945. A surprise attack broke out in the middle of the night while Berry manned a foxhole. Instead of the usual back-and-forth machine gun fire, dig this, Berry quickly found himself in a pitched hand grenade duel. In the middle of the night, 5 Japanese grenades rained down on Berry and the other men in his foxhole, and he kept throwing them back. So they would drop into the foxhole in the middle of the night. They'd have to find him, and Berry would throw them back at the enemy, rather than bailing out of the foxhole and finding cover elsewhere. Not knowing how much time was left on the fuses, Berry engaged in this deadly game of hot potato until a grenade landed in his foxhole that he couldn't get to in time. Ask yourself how many people would really do this. You see this in the movies and whatnot. How many people would actually do this? Instead of jumping out after this grenade had landed, he couldn't get to it. Instead of jumping out, Berry dove directly on top of the grenade without hesitation. He absorbed most of the blast and undoubtedly saved the men in his foxhole by sacrificing his own life. Charles Berry was awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously. That's courage, folks. I'll be right back. All right, I am back. Now, if you've ever seen the movie Hacksaw Ridge, about a World War II combat medic. If you haven't seen it, you got to see it. I've probably seen it 3 or 4 times. It's my favorite war movie of all time. It is just so fabulous. And every single time that I watch it, I just like a blubbering schoolgirl at the end. I just get choked up. I get teared up every time I watch it. I just can't help myself. But it's representative of just how important combat medics are. And speaking of which, we're on to the Korean War. We've gone from World War I, Medal of Honor recipients in World War II, now we're on to the Korean War. The year is 1953. A mere 6 months before the end of the war, Bryant Womack is the only combat medic attached to his unit on a night of foot patrol. After a run-in with a numerically superior force, okay, Womack's unit suffered severe casualties. He immediately began to render aid to the wounded and was seriously wounded himself early on. Womack refused medical attention, opting to assist his fellow soldiers, knowing that he was the only medic. And like I said, these guys they are not soldiers necessarily, but they are they're very important, and B, these guys are some of the bravest sons of guns you'll ever meet in your entire life. While treating one of them, Womack was struck by an enemy mortar. The majority of his right arm was blown away. As a medic, Womack knew full well the consequences of delaying field dressing to his own wounds, yet he continued to treat the other wounded men and provided direction to others in first aid techniques without regard for his own life. He collapsed from blood loss shortly thereafter and died while being carried away from the firefight by his comrades. Brian Womack was awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously. And you hear stories about this kind of stuff all the time, where these combat medics just put everything else aside and they do what needs to be done for everyone else but themselves. And again, if you watch, the Hacksaw Ridge is a true story. It's based on a true story, and it is moving, to say the least. On to Vietnam. The nightmare of jungle warfare reached a pinnacle during the Vietnam War. A hostile foreign environment that supplied both sides with infinite camouflaged attack positions led to heavy casualties on both sides. Heavier on their side than ours. Modern body armor and Kevlar had yet to be invented, which inevitably led to horrific wounds from booby-trapped explosives. On the night of May 7, 1970, Kenneth Kays was serving as a medic, here again, with the prestigious 101st Airborne Division. Their defensive positions were ambushed by enemy sappers, and a number of Kays' fellow soldiers were killed and wounded. Without hesitation, here again, combat medic. Without hesitation, Kays made his way to the perimeter, moving toward enemy fire to help the wounded. That's when an explosive charge severed part of his leg off. Egad. Instead of treating himself or waiting to be helped by someone else, Kays fastened a tourniquet onto his leg to slow the bleeding and continued toward the perimeter. He's kept moving. Half his leg's blown off, and he just tourniquets it up, and away he goes. The balls on these guys are just unbelievable. It's just absolutely unbelievable, the heroism of these guys. It blows you away, man. After finding, treating, and moving 2 men to relative safeties, Kays again returned to the perimeter, still losing blood, this time continuing beyond enemy lines to rescue another wounded American. It wasn't until Kays was satisfied that wounded men were treated and evacuated that he allowed a medic to focus on his own severed leg. So after everybody else was satisfied, everyone else was taken care of, then he collapses and allows others to take care of him. Absolutely unbelievable. Okay, I'm going to take another short break, and I'm going to end this thing with Medal of Honor recipient Michael P. Murphy, SEAL Team 1.
You're watching the Common Constitutionalist video podcast.
Yeah, baby! Yeah.
So if you've ever seen the movie Lone Survivor or read the book Lone Survivor, if you haven't done either, read the book. Yeah, the book is better, from Marcus Luttrell, than the movie, obviously. You can't condense, you've got to be able to condense that much material from a book into a 2.5 or 2 hour movie. It can't be done. They did it as well as anyone could do, but that's just the way it is. And like I said, it's called Lone Survivor, and it was about Marcus Luttrell's misadventure in Operation Red Wings, but it's more about Lieutenant Michael Murphy, the Medal of Honor hero. So he was a SEAL Delivery Vehicle Team 1, Naval Special Warfare Task Unit, and the place was Asadabad, Konar Province in Afghanistan, 27-28 June 2005. And this is the actual citation. So I'll go ahead and read it. For conspicuous gallantry, at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty, as the leader of a special reconnaissance element with Naval Special Warfare Task Unit Afghanistan on 27 and 28 June 2005, while leading a mission to locate a high-level anti-coalition militia leader, Lieutenant Lieutenant Murphy demonstrated extraordinary heroism in the face of grave danger in the vicinity of Asadabad, Konar Province, Afghanistan. Okay, might have swallowed a bug, I don't know. On June 28, 2005, operating in an extremely rugged enemy-controlled area, Lieutenant Murphy's team was discovered by anti-coalition militia sympathizers who revealed their position to Taliban fighters. As a result, between 30 and 40 enemy fighters besieged his four-member team. Demonstrating exceptional resolve, Lieutenant Murphy valiantly led his men in engaging the large enemy force. The ensuing fierce firefight resulted in numerous enemy casualties, as well as wounding all 4 members of the team. Ignoring his own wounds and demonstrating exceptional composure, Lieutenant Murphy continued to lead and encourage his men. When the primary communicator, that was Danny Dietz, fell mortally wounded, Lieutenant Murphy repeatedly attempted to call for assistance for his beleaguered teammates. Realizing the impossibility of communicating in the extreme terrain and in the face of almost certain death, he fought his way into an open terrain to gain a better position to transmit a call. This deliberate, heroic act deprived him of cover, exposing him to direct enemy fire. This one's tough, man. I'll tell you, this one's really tough. Finally achieving contact with his headquarters, Lieutenant Murphy maintained his exposed position while he provided his location and requested immediate support for his team. In this final act of bravery, he continued to engage the enemy until mortally wounded, gallantly giving his life for his country and for the cause of freedom. And his buddies, by the way, his teammates. But his selfish leadership, courageous actions, and extraordinary devotion to duty, Lieutenant Murphy reflected great credit upon himself and upheld the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service. And he was awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously. I don't know. This kind of stuff gets to me. Go out on Monday, go to a gravesite, go to a Veterans Park, just walk amongst them, walk amongst these heroes. You'll probably find a Medal of Honor winner amongst them if the grave sites are large enough. But pay tribute to these guys. Memorial Day is to celebrate, is to mourn and thank the fallen. This is not Veterans Day. Sure, you can thank a veteran. I do all the time. Thank you for your service. I thank police, whatever. Thank the firemen. But this Memorial Day, go out to a veteran's grave site, walk amongst the fallen, and just thank them. And thank God that they were there to do the bidding, to do our bidding. So we can be here, I can be here to do what I do, and you can be there to do what you do. So thanks for watching. Have a great balance of the weekend. And God bless America, and God bless our military. Take care.